Welcome to another edition of UCF Football Now. My, oh my, do we have a lot to talk about this week. I'm Mike Bianchi, sports columnist of the Orlando Sentinel. That man over there, he is our UCF insider, Jason Beede, beat reporter and insider for OrlandoSentinel.com and the Orlando Sentinel, if you get the paper edition. Wow, Jason, what a game. The war on I-4. Saturday night in Tampa. It truly was a war. It went back and forth. UCF jumps out to a 28-0 lead. John Rice Plumlee gets injured, tweaks his hamstring. He's out of the game. USF comes storming back. They actually take the lead with 7 minutes left in the game. And then Mikey Keane, the old reliable reliever, brings UCF back with 20 seconds left. Game-winning touchdown catch by Alec Holler, and what a catch it was. All right, did UCF deserve to win this game against a one-win USF team?
I think they did, only because of that last drive. I mean, you still have to get, even though the defense had been really, giving up 22 points in the third quarter, and you were wondering, can this UCF defense get another stop? And Gus Malzahn said Monday, look, we had some defensive problems. Obviously, USF was able to move the ball down the field and put up a lot of points in the second half. But when it came down to it, they had to win the game. They got the defensive stop. They marched down the field. They had an incredible pass. Javon Baker, 41-yard grab. That was incredible on its own. And then you go down and see that, now what's been called the Holy Holler catch to Alec Holler. They deserve to win that game because they won the game. They almost lost it. They almost didn't deserve to win that game. I mean, when you're up 28-0, 31-7, and I don't even know what would have happened if John Rice Plumlee stayed in the game. Maybe the defense doesn't struggle as much. Maybe the offense puts up more points or whatever happens. They deserve to win that game because of that final drive.
Yeah, Holy Holler is right. One-handed falling backwards catch. Alec Holler, the former walk-on, gets the scholarship last year, grew up in Orlando, going to UCF games. What an ending that was for him. And we don't know if he'll be back next year. He still has a year of eligibility left, although he's a senior. But, man, just talk about what that catch meant for UCF.
Yeah, and this isn't the only play he's had that really, came big for UCF. He obviously had the other play called the Holler Hop, where he, basically dove for that first down. And now to have this catch, I mean, you mentioned it. He's a walk-on. You talk about his story. Winter Park kid, played for Coach Kruzek. Sorry, not Winter Park. He's from Winter Park, but played at Trinity Prep for Kruzek. And he's been at UCF since 2018. He earned a scholarship. He dealt with a knee injury, and it's just a really remarkable story, not just for UCF, but all of college football.
Another remarkable story, Mikey Keane comes in relief of JRP in the second half. Had a good passing percentage, but the offense sort of stalled a little bit. And then at the end of the game, as Gus Malzahn said, Mikey Keane answered the bell yet again. What's his legacy at UCF?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, his legacy. I mean, you talk about UCF's and backup quarterbacks going back to DJ Mack and his performance against Memphis in the 2018 title game. This wasn't a title game, but it essentially kind of was a title game for UCF to reach the title game. So you talk about Mikey Keane's legacy, and Gus Malzahn has said all along this season they feel like they have two quarterbacks they can win with, and they just continue to prove him right. John Rice Plumlee obviously had a spectacular performance before he went out, and Mikey Keane, again, you mentioned it, reliable reliever. They have something with both those guys playing.
Absolutely, they do. And this rivalry, and I wrote about this in my column after the game, I wish there was some way, somehow, that this rivalry can continue. I'm at the war on I-4. There have been a lot of memorable moments in this rivalry, although it's not a storied, traditional rivalry of 100 years, but still, I think this is a great rivalry. I think both schools love it. I think both sets of fans love it. Should either side want to continue with this rivalry, I think both sides should want to continue with this rivalry.
I think it makes sense for both sides as well. When you talk about USF staying behind the American with UCF going to the Big 12, Terry Mohajir has talked about his scheduling philosophy in the future. I understand USF doesn't have an opening for 5 or 6 years. But once they do, it makes a lot of sense to keep this rivalry back alive. If USF was playing Cincinnati or East Carolina or Navy and they were down 28-0, is there that same fight in the second half, knowing you're playing your rival? I'm not so sure. So the fact that that game was so exhilarating, and you go back to last year's game, 17-13, came down to the final drive as well. And we know all about 2017, obviously, where that game and that play by Mike Hughes. So there's just too many great moments to just say, let's never play again. So absolutely, they should keep this rivalry alive.
All right, so UCF, their last game in the American Athletic Conference will be the championship game this Saturday, a rematch with Tulane. Do we know about John Rice Plumlee yet? Is he, he tweaked that hamstring at the end of the first half. Is he going to be ready? What do you think is going to happen with John Rice Plumlee in the quarterback situation?
Yeah, Gus Malzahn revealed on Monday that John Rice actually has been dealing with a hamstring injury for a few weeks now. Obviously, he's a tough kid. We've seen time and time again John Rice Plumlee put his body on the line. You go back to the FAU game where he dove in and flipped over, and he's taking hit after hit. And so Gus said Monday, basically, he knows how to manage this. He knows how to, push it to his limits. And I think if he's healthy and feels comfortable playing on it, he's going to play. He's a tough kid. We've seen time and time again. I wouldn't be too surprised if he plays for a title game on the line.
All right, UCF just beat Tulane in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, and now they have to go back to New Orleans again for the rematch. Is there a disadvantage here for UCF? Because, again, it's hard to beat a team twice, especially on their home field.
It is really hard to beat a team. I got to give credit to Tulane. Going to Cincinnati hadn't lost a home game 32 straight. I was impressed the way they won that game. Tajay Spears is, one of the best running backs in the country, and he's going to be a problem for UCF. I think the one advantage that UCF does have with this rematch, obviously, if they hadn't lost to Navy, they would have been hosting the title game, right? So the fact that you get to go back to the same place, imagine if you had to go to Cincinnati, you wouldn't know what the atmosphere was like. You wouldn't know what the fans were like. They've played Cincinnati before, but because you literally played at Tulane 2 or 3 weeks ago, you know what the locker room's at. You know what the bus is going to be like. All of that from a mental standpoint, let alone what happens in the game itself, is an advantage that you're playing at the same place against the same team. Obviously, teams will adjust. Coaches will call different plays. So it is tricky to beat two teams in the same season. UCF done it before with Memphis and, a couple of years ago, obviously. But it's going to be an interesting game, no doubt.
UCF fans certainly can relate to what Tulane is going through right now. When Scott Frost, when he was at UCF, his final game at UCF, well, actually it didn't turn out to be his final game, but everybody knew he was going to Nebraska before the AAC Championship game. And here we have Tulane, Willie Fritz, their coach. Everybody seems to know he's going to be the next coach at Georgia Tech once the AAC Championship game is over. I guess he would possibly coach the bowl game if Tulane wins this game. But is this a distraction for Tulane, knowing that their coach is probably leaving after this season?
Yeah, it absolutely is a distraction, obviously. But, I think that's a twist I wasn't expecting. It makes sense. Willie Fritz is he's won everywhere he's been at, and he's turned around some programs even before Tulane. I think Georgia Southern, and even before that, I think it's Sam Houston State. So it's not surprising that Georgia Tech, a team that is under a rebuild itself, is going to hire a guy like Willie Fritz. And going into the title game, Willie Fritz addressed it on Monday and said, look, right now, he's the head coach at Tulane. And maybe he's not the head coach at Tulane next week, but right now he is. And they're going to stay focused on winning the championship. And look, UCF did so under Scott Frost. They won the Peach Bowl under Scott Frost. I don't know if Tulane and Willie Fritz would stay around for the Cotton Bowl. It's a different era, right? The reason Georgia Tech wants to make this hire as soon as possible is because the transfer portal window's open December 5th. So next week, it's going to be the wild, wild west again with the transfer portal. And you're going to see kids leaving, and that impacts. If you can have a coach in place, you're Georgia Tech, you want to make this hire. So it sounded like maybe they're doing a couple more interviews, and perhaps there were reports that, Willie Fritz had a done deal Sunday night, and now maybe they, weren't as high on him, but it does seem like he's headed that path to become Georgia Tech's next coach. But for now, it absolutely is a distraction.
Well, speaking of, we do have a done deal in some of the other coaching moves in college football. Luke Fickell, who UCF fans are very familiar with, the head coach of Cincinnati, boom, he's gone. He's leaving for the Wisconsin job. Obviously, that's a step up salary wise. I just wonder, though, is it a step up in status of jobs? Because Cincinnati's built a pretty good program and they're going to the Big 12 next year.
Yeah, that's the really interesting thing. I just feel like for all the jobs Luke Fickell could have left for and the interest he's received over the years and the fact that he stayed at Cincinnati and got them to the college football playoff and built the program his way. Now, when Cincinnati goes to the Big 12, he leaves. That, to me, if they weren't going to the Big 12, you can say, okay, he's done everything, right? Everything he can do at Cincinnati. But with that Big 12 factor and NIL and transfer portal and whatnot, I question the Wisconsin job taking by him. I don't know if that's going to work out for him. I'm not saying he can't turn Wisconsin around. I just, you look at the Big 10 and they're adding USC and UCLA, and obviously you're going to have to beat Ohio State and Michigan to win that conference. So that's a really interesting decision. I'll be interested to see and revisit that in a couple of years.
Luke Fickell's also going to have to beat the new coach at Nebraska. Scott Frost obviously got fired. Matt Rule, former Baylor coach, former Temple coach. He's the new coach at Nebraska. Scott Frost couldn't get it done there. Can Matt Rule?
It seems like it. I mean, he one of the hottest college coaches a few years ago. I think if you can win at Temple, you can probably win anywhere. And obviously he had success at Baylor, and NFL didn't go the way he wanted it to. But I think when you can say as a head coach, hey, look, I know what it takes to, be in the NFL, and you can bring high caliber transfers in, and you talk about Nebraska's history, I think that should work out. I think that's a good hire by them.
Willie Taggart gets fired at FAU. I think he's still being paid by FSU. Now he's going to get more buyout money from FAU. I'm curious, Scott Frost, could he take the FAU job? Maybe the USF job? What are you hearing about those, Jason?
Yeah, FAU is a really intriguing job. I mean, I knew they were struggling a little bit under Willie Taggart. What I didn't realize was, it was an interesting stat from Andrew Ivins of 24/7 Sports. At FAU under Willie Taggart, they were 1-10 after November 1st in his time. So obviously they had success early in the year, but when it came down to it at the end, they just weren't winning in the month of November, and that's what you have to do to compete for conference titles. And you look at FAU going to the American, joining USF. I mean, you could almost make the argument that FAU, with their on-campus stadium and, Brian White, the brother of Danny White, obviously at AD there, it might be a better job than USF, to be honest with you. I mean, you look at what Lane Kiffin did back in the day. So it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see who FAU hires.
All right, let's do a little rapid fire, shall we? We've been talking about Alec Holler's catch. What about Javon Baker's 41-yard diving catch to set up the game-winning touchdown against USF? How good a catch was that?
It was unbelievable. It kind of reminded me of Eli Manning and David Tyree in the Super Bowl way back when. I mean, Mikey Keane had to almost, he scrambled around, almost got tackled, make that throw, and just you see the ball in the air. And props to Javon Baker, absolutely amazing. But he pretty much got ousted by his teammate a couple of plays later, Alec Holler. Is that the greatest catch in UCF history, or do you think J.J. Wharton's catch against Temple in 2013, or there's obviously other ones you can think of, but is that the greatest catch in UCF history, Mike?
Well, the J.J. Wharton catch, as far as just sheer difficulty factor, I think J.J. Wharton's may have been a more difficult catch, but J.J. Wharton's wasn't the game winner. They still had to score again to win that game. Alec Holler's catch was a game winner, and it came falling out of bounds one-handed. So, man, sounds like a poll we should do on our radio show. In fact, maybe we'll do that this week, Jason. We'll let the listeners of my radio show decide what the greatest catch in UCF history was. But I'll go with J.J. Wharton for now. All right, what happened after that touchdown catch on the failed, what was that squib kick they tried that bounced up and USF recovers like at the 50?
Yeah, we asked Gus Malzahn after the game what the heck was the plan there, and obviously they didn't mean to kick it to the 50. They didn't mean to do a squib kick. They wanted it to kick it to the other 35-yard line because USF has a pretty good kick returner, one of the best in the country, and Brian Batey, and that was weird. But Keeping in touch with that Warren 4 game, what was the better game, Mike? 2017 or Saturday's game?
I think 2017 because both teams were really good that year. Both teams were fighting for the conference championship. It was on Black Friday, which means the nation was watching. When you have Dale Earnhardt Jr. tweeting about what a great game he's watching on TV back in 2017, I think that wins going away. All right, Mike Norvell, Florida State coach, obviously former Memphis coach. He said after Florida State beat the Gators over the weekend that Florida State is the state champs. Was he minimizing UCF?
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, I understand UCF and FSU aren't playing, and when UCF won't finish as the best team in Florida last year, they did beat Florida. So there's, that they had at the time. But I think when you have a team playing for a conference championship, which FSU isn't doing, and a team playing for a spot in the New Year's Six Bowl, which FSU isn't doing, you have to wait and see what happens. I understand Norvell is probably thinking about the big three only, but there's probably a potential for UCF to be ranked higher when it's all said and done. So we'll see what happens.
Which game was more exciting, UCF USF or Florida State?
Well, I think Florida State has that tradition. You mentioned earlier, it was played on Black Friday this year. They swapped those games. I was watching that game. I just feel like the way USF came back, I think that was the better game in my opinion. But both games were great. Tulane and UCF rematch in the AAC, like we've talked about. Tulane is a 2.5-point favorite, Mike. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair. Tulane's playing at home. Tulane just beat Cincinnati. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. All right, fan of the week. You like to pick a fan every week, a UCF fan of the week. What do we got this week?
Yeah, this one made me laugh. It felt really relatable for me. Trying to write about that game when it was back and forth and who was going to win. Well, this fan was trying to, they booked a hotel in New Orleans at 9:05. And then about an hour later, they canceled the hotel. And I guess when USF took the lead, right? You think, UCF's not going to make the title game. And then they rebooked at 11 o'clock after UCF did in fact win. They rebooked the hotel. So props to them. That is the life of covering UCF and watching UCF football, I guess.
That's a great story. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of UCF Football Now. Do not forget, we drop every Tuesday at OrlandoSentinel.com. We also have our own YouTube channel, so you can watch us there as well. So tell your friends, tell all of your fellow UCF fans that they need to be watching UCF Football Now. Hopefully, we'll be back next week to talk about UCF winning the conference championship and making plans for the Cotton Bowl. For Jason Beede, I'm Mike Bianchi. We will talk to you next week on another edition of UCF Football Now.